Hello guys. Well, in this final video we're going to talk about the argumentative connectors and the types of argument. These argumentative connectors, we're going to do just a really simple and quick reminder. You're supposed to know these ones from reading and composition. So we're going to check some of them. I'm just going to introduce like what do we use them for, and well, there's a list over there that you can take a look at and use. Hopefully you can use them in your writings to avoid the repetition of the typical ones now, because so, and all these different things. So let's go to the slide 110, and you will see the one from cause. Those are the ones that start over there. So as you can see in there, indicates that the enunciates that follow explain or rationalize the enunciates that preceded. But basically, these are intermediate words, now like connectors, which is almost the definition of connector. But in this particular case, is really important because they are going to be able to associate one argument to the reason, cause, and consequence. We have another ones more specific for cause and consequence, but they will be really useful for justifying, for somehow announcing or identifying a cause, right? The origin. This happened because of this. I did this, so I obtained this. This is important, being that we have this other consequence, etc. Right? So basically, these are the ones from cause. If we go into the next one, we have this one that is these ones that are really important, right? And these are the connectors of certainty. Remember that showing yourself secure and certain of what you're saying is really important in argumentation. If you're doubtful, if you say, right, just not sure of what you're saying, if you show a vocabulary and a body language that is not really the most appropriate one, well, your argument is going to be really weak. Remember that when we were analyzing, we were comparing demonstration versus argumentation. One important characteristic of argumentation is that the person or the one that presents the argument will be responsible for the success or failure of whatever you're sustaining, right? So if you're doubtful and not really certain, most likely your argument is not going to work. So these arguments help you to announce that what you're going to say next, it has been proved, it is validated, it has been generally accepted, right? So you have many things here, such as it is evident that, it is undeniable, undoubtedly, it cannot be ignored, it is unquestionable, etc. Okay, so it is important to do this, but hey, please use them carefully, yes, because as they are certainty, right, or they are certainty connectors, what goes next should be certain, yes, because a very good way to destroy an argument is using an argumentative connector of certainty and then proving that the next argument is false. Yes, it is evident that there is life on Mars. I don't know how evident is that. Sure, there has been certain discoveries of microorganisms, etc., right? But not really it is evident or undeniable, or it is a fact, right? So by saying, hey, but you were saying that was for sure, and then you gave us like a false information or some false information, well, that is a pretty good way to destroy an argument. So please use them, show certainty, but make sure that what you're saying is in fact something certain. Now we have the arguments of condition that probably you can use whenever you're using a second conditional, first conditional, and in general, more than grammar, it's when there's one thing that is depending of another. Yes, one factor that depends on another one. Yes, there's like a consequence or a possible result, and these connectors are going to help you to link together these two ideas. So we have here such as if, as long as, according to, unless that, etc. Right? Then we have the ones of consequence. That of course would be pretty much than the first one that we saw of cause, but with the opposite reaction, that is consequence now. So it indicates that the enunciates that follow, what I'm going to say next, is the effect or the previous reasoning or the result of a condition or cause. Yes, so basically this is just to mention all these different things, right? So we have all these different ones, thereupon, then, therefore, thus, hence. Yes, I ride bicycle, hence I have a very good physical state or somehow physical performance, right? As a consequence, I'm really healthy, right? All these different things, you just put them together. Remember that these are pretty essential, let's say pretty basic, but they somehow are useful to improve your argument in terms of the language use. Yes, your command of the language is also going to give you like an extra somehow of a convincing power, if you want to call it that way. Just if you compare it, for example, with a person that always says the same 10 words, right? So try to use them. Finally, we have these ones of opposition, right? They're pretty good, especially if you're using these contrastive counterarguments, right? So if you are going to compare something versus another thing, if you're going to make this contrast, for sure this will be really, really useful. Comparing, establishing comparisons, right? So we have here conversely, but, contrary, adversely, however, nevertheless, nonetheless, notwithstanding, in spite of, opposingly, a lot of them. Okay, so just normalize to use these because they're pretty useful. Okay, very well, guys. Let's go to the final part that, as I mentioned before, is the types of arguments. So here we have a couple. I am going to show you like some of the different types of arguments that we have in here, and I'm going to give you the example of an argument and how to counter argument, right? So let's go to slide 116, and you will see that the first one is that of induction. Yes. So how can I counter? Let's say what are some arguments that I can find and some counter arguments to that. Yes. So an induction argument is an argument that is proven by specific instances, right? Let's say that my argument or my reasoning or my support can only be proved in some very specific moment, right? Or in some very specific field, occasion, situation, context. So let's take a look at this. This, guys, is an argument of induction. Yes, this is a type of argument of induction. My English teacher plays movies in class just to kill some time as he didn't prepare his lesson, right? In that particular moment, and if I have the evidence, that may be true. Yes, that this day the teacher was a little bit lazy, didn't prepare the class the day before, so he says, I'm going to play the movie, and bye 2 hours of class, and later on, I don't know, we'll make them write a summary, and that's it. Yes? So that may be an argument by induction. It can be only proved in that specific moment. It is a valid argument only for that moment, in that place, for that teacher, in that school, and no more. Okay? Now, what could be some counter arguments for that? Yes? So because basically I'm explaining over here the types of arguments, but also how could you counter argument that? Yes? First of all, there are not enough examples. Yes? So what if the teacher doesn't do this every class, or even every Friday or every specific day of the week. With that, you could counter-argument that. Atypical examples, right? So this thing of the movie thing only happened once in the whole year, or only happened once. I mean, he's been my teacher for 5 years, and this is the first time that he does that. So that cannot really be an argument. Well, sure, it may have had happened at class, but I'm going to give him the benefit of doubt because it is something that he doesn't normally do, right? It is atypical. It's not something that presents itself a lot, that is very frequent. And then we have these ones that negative examples are better. What does it mean? That the opposite to my argument is actually really good. So for example, okay, yes, my teacher did this, like played this movie, but the rest of the week was excellent. It was really good. All the classes were really prepared with materials, with a lot of somehow well-thought activities, etc. Right? So this playing a movie just for burning some time, this is not really like the constant, and all the other, let's say, moments in which he did something different is great, right? So hopefully it is clear. Induction only proven in this specific context, in these specific moments, and we have all these possibilities of counter-argument that. Okay, then we have these different ones over here in the slide 117. Yes, they can be these two, deduction or categorical. Yes, so the deduction argument are normally proven by general concepts, something really general, right? So for example, we have an argument such as Ibagué is a warm weather city. Okay, you listen to that argument and you could say, sure, yeah, in general, most of the cases, depending on your concept of warm, depending where are you from, and depending if you have lived all your life in a warm Colombian city, you could say that sure, Ibagué could be generally somehow labeled as warm, right? So that will be one. Arguments proven by general concepts. Ibagué is a warm city. Or it can be also categorical. Yes? So what is true of one category is true of all. That will be an argument. Remember that we're talking about arguments, right? So we have this example over here. Paisa people are inventive and hardworking. Yes, so what I'm going to say over here is that one member of that category, what will be the category? Well, Paisa people. Yes, we're talking about all people like that were born in that specific region of Colombia that covers like all the towns, municipalities, departments, cities, etc. that can be named Paisas. Yes, so you could say Paisa people are inventive and hardworking. Okay, sure, I can say that in general terms. It is true. Yes, we have a lot of companies owned by Paisa people. We have this only subway in Colombia that was designed, well, not designed, that was somehow implemented in Medellin, and all these different things, right? Like there are different ideas that could tell us that maybe that affirmation, that statement could be true, right? If you see, I grouped them together in there because they both have similarities, no? They talk about generalities and things that at some point could be considered relatively true, right? So those can be arguments of deduction and concepts. Yes. Now, how could you counter argument those arguments of deduction or categorical? Well, here there are different ones, right? such as not in that category. Yes, Ibagué is a one weather city, so some people could say, Ibagué is not a city. Ibagué is a town. I don't agree with that. I was born in Ibagué. I think it is a city. It is a small city, but it is a city nonetheless. Nevertheless, some people could use this tricky categorization thing in order to compare it. Like if you compare it to Bogota, if you compare it to Medellin, if you compare it to some other cities that are actually much bigger, like probably that label of city for Ibagué would make it closer to some other municipalities. Yes, that cannot be like, or that are not necessarily perceived as cities because of the size, the amount of industries, the employment, the contribution to the gross domestic product, etc. Right? So you could say you could attack the category. Yes, that would be not in the category and not a real category. Um, Now the next one is really important. It says not true or fall in that category. Yes. So if you say, for example, that Ibagué is a warm weather city, you could say, okay, sure, but what about those times in which it's really, really cold? What about those times in which there's this huge amount of rain, of precipitation, and then there are floods, and there are all this trouble related with waters and sewers and all these different things? How can you call that a warm weather city when you had a lot of different problems with this? Or what about those sectors of the city that are usually always really cold, right? Under certain conditions. Let's think about La Pola, let's think about Alaska and up there, right? So you can sort of undermine the argument by saying, well, not all the cases are in that way. This is not true for all. And same for Paisa people. You can say, okay, no, I know many Paisa people who are really lazy or who are somehow opposing to that. Yes, you can say, let's say, talk about rates of criminality. Like we have a lot of problems with narco traffic or violence or things like that, and they are in Medellin, for example, or they are in Antioquia, right? So that's a little bit of a way to counter argument that, like to look for holes or to look for examples in that general category, like individual examples or specific examples that undermine the general argument, right? When you generalize, you sort of risk the possibility of saying, but it's not everybody, but it's not all of them, but it's not always, but it's yes. So basically, it's simple enough to use any of these counter arguments to counter argument that original idea. Now, if you go to the slide number 118, yes, you will have the disjunctive argument. What does it mean? That we have a choice, or we have different options, and one is better than the other, right? So you're given like a different amount of possibilities. Of course, the minimum ones are two, one or the other, or sometimes you have more than one, right? But that is a disjunctive argument. There is a choice, and one is better than the other. So let's talk about this argument. It says you either cheat on the exam or fail the subject. Yes, that is an argument. You say, okay, you need to cheat because otherwise, if you don't do it, I don't know, you have not studied, whatever. Let's say that the argument doesn't enter in details over here, doesn't provide any other additional detail. But apparently, that's it. You either cheat or fail the subject. So that is a disjunctive argument that presents you with only these two options or more than one. and one is always going to be better than the other. Of course, this is an argument to convince you that you are supposed to cheat, right? Mm, Now, counter arguments. Really simple. Yes, there are more choices. You don't have only the possibility of cheating or failing the subject. You could study more. You can look for help for the teacher in terms of another explanation. You can talk to a friend so he or she helps you with repetition of certain things. Uh, you can, I don't know, ask the teacher to postpone the test. Well, there are a lot of different options, right? Not only cheating, that is not the only one. Now, the other possibility is that the suggested choice is bad. Sure, it's really bad if you get caught. Um, you risk expulsion, you risk losing not only your subject but all of your career, etc. Right? Um, so that's another possible counter-argument. The rejected choice is good. Yes? What is the rejected choice? Failing the subject. Well, that might be good. Yes? If you're really not concentrate, if you're really unable to understand a lot, or you were unable to learn a lot of the different things that were taught for whatever reason, actually repeating the subject or failing the subject might be a good thing, right? Like, you have the opportunity of let's say take seriously the subject one more time, learn certain things that will be prerequisite for future subjects, etc. Right? So that could be a counter argument. Or you can do them both. Yes, you can actually cheat and get discovered and be still, fail the subject still. Yes. So those are like the different possibilities for counter argumenting the disjunctive let's say type of argument. Okay. Finally, we have the argument that is hypothetical or causal, that, as you can imagine, uh, basically mentions that one thing leads to another. Yes, there is like a cause and then it has a consequence, right? So we have this one. If you continue eating hamburgers, you're going to gain a lot of weight. That would be in the 118, right? So the argument is trying to persuade you not to eat more hamburgers, right? Because if you do this, this will happen. That is a hypothetical causal argument. Now, how can you counter-argument that? Well, the factor does not have causal power. Yes, so you can say, okay, no, probably you're going to gain weight because of a hormonal problem, and not really for eating hamburgers. Yes, of course, that would be for a specific person. May not always cause. Well, there are people who have great metabolism, especially at certain ages, and they can eat and eat and eat, and they will never get, well, not never, but at least during a span of time, they will not gain weight. Yes? There are other causes. Sure, eating hamburger can contribute to gaining weight, but what about sugar? What about sodas? What about certain candies, chocolate? What about bread? Yes, well, hamburger has bread, but I mean like the one that you use especially for breakfast, or some other products that are not necessarily junk food, right? Counter causes exist to stop it. Okay, so sure, you can eat hamburgers, but what if you go to the gym and exercise really well, and you work really hard on exercise? Well, you might eat hamburgers now and then, and you won't gain weight. What if you? I know that this is not the ideal, no? What if you eat a lot of hamburgers and then have a surgery, for example, right? So it's not necessarily like this thing. And the other one, effect is actually good. What about if you're really thin, to the point of threatening your health or something like that? So eating hamburgers and gaining weight, well, cannot be necessarily that bad, right? So those are the different types of arguments. Hopefully you notice what I did there. That was presenting the argument, classifying it, and then providing certain possibilities for counter argumentation. Okay. Well, guys, assignment for this week. What we're going to do is this. There is an example in the slide 120 and 121. Yes, we have some arguments in there that are 5. Yes, and in the other slide, in the slide 121, we have let's say some let's say classifications in there in which they can sort of being somehow labeled or organized or classified in there. Okay, so there are some examples in there. So what I'm going to ask you is to do this again in groups of up to 4 people. You are going to write 5 arguments of your own creation. Okay, please don't download them from the internet or something like that. Just try to use them about whatever topic that you want. Yes, the topic is really free, and you are going to classify them. Okay, you're going to classify them in one type of argument over here. That will be the part number 1. Write the arguments, 5 arguments, and then classify them in deduction, induction, categorical, disjunctive, etc. Okay, that will be the part number 1. Okay, and part number 2 of the assignment will be counter argument that. Okay, so you're going to take the argument that you classified, and then you're going to counter argument, right? You're going to do it yourself. In this case, should be easy enough, right? And you're going to write another argument that counters the original one. Yes, so basically you're going to hopefully make use of the explanation that I just gave you for being able to counter arguments, certain types of arguments, and hopefully you will be able to do that. They don't need to be really long, like the arguments are statements of one sentence. The counter arguments are usually the same, no? Another statement of one sentence, so if you need to write a little bit more, well, by 2 sentences, maximum 3, okay? But that's basically it. Okay, guys, thanks a lot, and see you on the next videos. Bye-bye.